For me, and most likely a lot of you watching this, we may never get the chance to own our very own Mac Studio. But there is a different device in this Apple event on March 8th that we may actually have the chance of owning. And that is the new 5th generation iPad Air. Granted, it still starts at $600. So in this video, we'll be comparing it to an iPad Pro, which costs $80 less. With this new 5th revision of the iPad Air, the differences between Air and Pro are getting increasingly smaller. Now, I talked about an iPad Pro which was $80 cheaper than the new iPad Air. Which one am I talking about? Well, bet you could have guessed. It's the one sitting right in front of me. Of course, I've got to add a little bit of a bias alert towards the fact that I own this and not the new iPad Air. But I know everything about each device and their differences and similarities. So that's what we're going to be covering today, and an opportunity to give you an educated buying decision so you don't accidentally miss out on some stuff you might enjoy. Let's start where we were with the price. iPad Air baseline, $600. 64 gigabytes of storage, Wi-Fi only. That's all you get. That's all that she wrote. And then we have this here, the iPad Pro 3rd generation, or if you're someone who sticks to Apple's stupid naming conventions, this is the iPad Pro 1st generation 11-inch. Whatever, it's the 11-inch iPad Pro from 2018. This is the device that is the grandfather of Apple's current design language. It's the first one that brought the cut-off edges that can now be found on the new iMac, the iPhones, the upcoming MacBook Air, and the other iPads. Now this iPad Pro, baseline $520. That's also 64 gigs of storage, Wi-Fi only, stuff like that. Pretty identical, but $80 less. However, as you could hopefully see on the box there, this is Apple certified refurbished. Apparently with their mobile devices, they replace the entire battery as well as the shell. So the only thing that's really refurbished in this tablet is the screen and the logic board and the port and like a few other things. Now, on one hand, I want to believe what they're saying, but on the other hand, that's a huge amount of money that they're putting into a device which is, well, it's refurbished. If you put a refurbished device and a new one next to each other, people would not be able to tell. So let's move on to the first major difference between these two tablets, the screen. The iPad Pro comes with an 11-inch ProMotion 120 Hz display, while the iPad Air still has a 10.9-inch screen sitting at a regular 60 Hz. If you're looking for a device just for content consumption, I would not worry about 120 Hz. Yeah, the ProMotion stuff, I don't really care. Scrolling through Twitter is going to be the same for me on this device and one that's 60 Hz. However, I will mention if you are an artist and you want to use the 2nd generation Apple Pencil, which both of these do support, then maybe look at this device a little bit more. The 120 Hz, it might not be perceivable to my eye or even yours, but however, the pencil latency, the amount of time it takes for your pencil to touch the screen and the drawing to appear, is going to be greatly reduced. Okay, content consumption is fine with a 60 Hz screen. That's the conclusion I've come to. However, this machine does have one aspect where it's better than the iPad Air in terms of consuming content, and that's the speakers. Now, if you're someone like me who hates wearing headphones, they're incredibly uncomfortable, I like my speakers. This iPad Pro has a quad speaker array, while the iPad Air may have 4 speaker grills like this one, it only has dual firing speakers. This means that you still get stereo sound, just in most cases it probably won't be as loud or as full as compared to this older iPad Pro. So yeah, speakers better on this, worse on the iPad Air in some ways. Okay, moving on. FaceTime. Do you do a lot of video calling? If so, you might want to consider the iPad Air more than, say, an older iPad Pro, where you could save your money, because the new iPad Air finally has center stage. And all this means is that they put a wider lens selfie camera on the new iPad Air, and it crops into your face and tracks you around the room. My Logitech 720p webcam from 2005 does that, but woo, yay! Anyway, so if you do a lot of video calling, that is a pretty cool feature, and you might want to look into it. This uses Face ID, iPad Air uses Touch ID. Now, my daily driver is still the iPhone 7, and unfortunately I still will die on the hill that Touch ID is more reliable than Face ID. When I'm out and about, I think I'd actually prefer to have Touch ID on my device. So again, something to think of. So when it comes to performance, I'll be honest, Chief, I don't think it matters. I always buy the used and cheaper device, so it's already not at the peak performance that it typically was. So when it comes to performance, the M1 is stupidly overpowered for a tablet, especially one that is running something as simple as iPadOS. No matter how much Apple wants to replace it, this most likely cannot replace your laptop that you're using, especially if you're intimate with macOS or Windows. If you're using a Chromebook, yeah, this might be actually a little bit more versatile, but compared to the actual computer operating systems, no. What this does hopefully mean is the longevity for these M1 based devices should be really good, especially compared to the previous A series. These are so much more powerful, then it should support iPadOS updates into the far future. Now the A12X that I have in mind is completely fine. I mean, it's going to get software updates for a minimum of 3 years into the future, hopefully longer than that considering it's a Pro device. But there is one major caveat that, if true, could be a pretty big deal and might actually persuade you to get the iPad Air. There is a leaker on Twitter. Let me pull up the link here. Margin Blue official on Twitter is apparently leaking the fact that, quote, Apple is developing a smart system for iPadOS. Apps will continue to open full screen but automatically shrink when connected to a keyboard and trackpad. Internally, it is called Apple Mixer. We don't know if it will be included in iPadOS 16 or not, but it should be an M1 iPad exclusive. So even this iPad Pro here will no longer be Pro due to the fact that it wasn't Pro enough to run this Pro software, and I guarantee you this Mixer or whatever can run on older devices. So think of it this way. If you're considering picking up a device as well as maybe a Magic Keyboard or the Logitech Folio thing to use as a laptop replacement or supplement or something of the sort, this is something you might want to consider. I'm not saying buy the M1 iPad Air or iPad Pro because of what I just said here. I'm saying maybe wait until this is leaked a little bit more or made more official. Maybe get subscribed and we'll talk about it. However, with all of that covered, this basically ends my video. That's the iPad Air and the iPad Pro. Okay, thank you for watching. Let me know what I can improve. I know there's a lot. And yeah, make sure to tune in next time.